Fred Reichheld demonstrated 20 years ago that selling to existing customers is more profitable and less costly, that a 5% increase in retention rates can increase profitability by 25%. Unfortunately, few software and tech companies learned this lesson back when Fred was teaching it, since the majority of marketing budgets and efforts still go toward net new acquisition. Forrester's research shows that surveyed customer-obsessed firms grew 2.5 times faster than non-obsessed ones and retained 2.2 times more customers per year. Now, no one would disagree with the idea of putting the customer at the center of business decisions. The challenge, however, is in operationalizing that kind of obsession, answering questions about who should do what, how long will it take, and how much it costs, and then crafting the right strategy based on your company's strengths and what your customers truly value. Now, the tackling the idea of how obsessed to become requires work, not just jumping onto the customer-led growth bandwagon. And who better to learn from than someone who's literally written a book on the topic. Hello, and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success Podcast, brought to you by SparkToro.com. I have an co-host, and my guest today is Georgiana Laudi. Did I say that correctly, your last name?
Laudi, but yep, close enough.
Now, Georgiana, you're a 20-year plus SaaS marketing growth advisor who's helped brands like Sprout Social, Appcues, Unbounce, and SparkToro. You've been launching and building B2B and B2C brands since 2000. You are now the co-founder and CEO for Get the Funnel, where you and your co-founder developed the customer-led growth framework. They use CLG to help teams understand exactly who their best customers are and how to reach, resonate with, and retain more of them. I believe it was while leading marketing for Unbounce that you discovered customer experience mapping, one where the entire relationship with customers from experiencing the problem to engagement and expansion is measured not based on transactional moments and business metrics, but instead on customer success milestones. And in operationalizing the process of helping customers reach their goals, you discovered that you'd help the company reach theirs. And you actually did that over at Unbounce. And the following year, you grew revenue by nearly 900%. Now, that's quite phenomenal. And I'm curious, was there a moment where you realized you'd be better off creating Forget the Funnel as it is today, as opposed to continuing to work with companies as a marketing growth advisor? If so, what was it?
By the way, thank you very much for that introduction. That was fantastic and a great recap. To answer your question, though, so one thing that I wanted to clarify, the 900% growth was obviously at the company level. There's lots to credit there. But one of the biggest reasons that we were able to grow in that way in those following 2 years is because of the alignment this exercise basically afforded us. We were all looking in the right direction, all focused with a lot of empathy for our customers and a deep understanding of our customers. And we had operationalized that. And we were able to, as a team, I definitely do not take sole credit for that growth. It was definitely a team effort across product, customer success, and marketing for sure. So I just wanted to clarify that. When I left working in-house, truthfully, predominantly just because I had a family, I just started my family, and I've always knew that I had this sort of entrepreneurial sort of bug or whatever you call it. I knew I was eventually going to go out on my own, and I had been there for about 5 years. And so it was time to basically branch out and hit a next phase. And when I did leave that in-house role, I was immediately inundated with outreach from SaaS founders basically asking for help, either to hire me in a full-time position or to help consult them because, and it's still somewhat true today, but especially at the time, this is in 2017, late 2016, early 2017, there's not a lot of folks who could say they'd been working in SaaS for quite that long, young industry. And I just happened to be quite experienced in quite a young industry, and SaaS is still quite young. But it was basically that experience from going from a sort of early stage startup into more serious growth that not a lot of, especially marketing folks, had gone through that, basically that evolution. And so there was a lot of demand for that expertise. A lot of, my marketing team is great. They don't really have the experience. They've never gone through that evolution from a 10-person company up to a nearly 300-person company. That scale of not only marketing, but team introduces a lot of challenges that mid-career or early career marketers have never experienced. And so that sort of extra level of experience, again, was something that they were seeking out. And it was around that time that I actually met Claire Selentrop, who was in a similar situation. She had just left Calendly in a similar situation to me, inundated with demand because of that same experience. And we decided that we would focus on helping those in-house marketers basically think more strategically, get out of the weeds, manage up with their founders and CEOs or CMOs, depending on the setup, and basically just think more holistically and strategically about marketing. And so that's how Forget the Funnel came to be, was really as a content series aimed at in-house marketers and practitioners. And it has definitely evolved from there. But we still do work with companies, and we get into the nitty-gritty with companies. We love the work. And so we still do it, in addition to continuing to support in-house folks.
Terrific. And you've obviously had quite a journey to date. What would you say would be your personal area of strength?
Oh, that's a good question. I am definitely one of those people that can zoom out and zoom in at the drop of a dime. So I am strategic to a fault. I already knew this, but I've done, and if you're familiar with the Clifton Strengths Finder, I've done this multiple times over the years, and strategic is like number one on the list every single time I've done it. Over the past, I'll say easily 10 years, I've done it 3 times. So I definitely have this innate sort of need to think of things holistically before then drilling in and figuring out what the solutions are. And so you can imagine how that ties very nicely to customer experience mapping, right? And thinking about the customer experience from this sort of 30,000 foot view, like what is the big idea here? And so that helps me, if I can get that sort of high level understanding of not only the customer experience, but also the relationship with the product and also the relationship with the business, then I can help connect dots on what might be slightly off or what some growth opportunities might be. And so that was that experience that you were describing during that very kind introduction, which was that sort of that experience that I had. And it was in, I'll say 2013 or 2014, I think 2013, where I saw this customer journey map, this holistic customer journey map through the lens of customers, through the lens of these values, milestones, and had that sort of light bulb moment of, whoa, this is how we should be thinking about the product experience we're providing and the customer experience that we're providing. And by looking holistically in that way, and then making sure that we deeply understand our customers and we understand the value that we provide, then we can drill into each of those milestones and figure out where are we dropping the ball, where are there opportunities that we're missing, where are we leaving these sort of success gaps for our customers, and then obviously to reflect that, what are our opportunities for growth, and then figure out how to prioritize them. So the answer is like strategic to a fault almost, but I also really love the execution side and getting into the details, which is that whole zoom out, zoom in thing.
In that area of strength though, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
With the holistic view. So what I find happens a lot, I would say almost all the time, what we all fall prey to at some point is losing sight of that big picture when we are in it every day, the day in, the day out of execution and implementation and targets and goals and just doing the work. It is very easy to lose sight of the whole. And every company that I've worked with, and I've worked with many at this point, lose sight of that at some point. And sometimes they lose sight of it for long enough that their customer actually changes right under their noses. And they continue on their path with their strategy, either their messaging and positioning, or their content strategy, or their ad strategy, or even their product activation and onboarding strategies, without doubling back and asking themselves, is this even our customer anymore? And there's a number of reasons why that happens, right? One of the reasons is products evolve, right? This is technology, like we want our products to evolve and get better over time, and product teams are amazing at doing that. And our product changes, just full stop. The market also dramatically changes. How people made a purchase decision about your product 3 years ago is an eternity different from how they would make that decision today, let alone 6 months ago. So our customer also dramatically changes. The market changes, our customers change, the product changes, and our team also changes. So these things tend to morph and change and switch over time. And sometimes we just lose sight of who are we even serving anymore? And do we deeply understand them the way we did when we first launched this product? It's very typical for companies to be founded by people who have the problem that is being solved by the product, but things change. Market changes, your customer changes, your product changes, and your team absolutely changes. And not that deep understanding also can't live inside of one person's head. And at a certain point, we've got to enable and empower our team to make really strategic decisions and understand our customers at that intimate level. That's what happens. We lose sight of the big picture, or we have it at one point and we take for granted that it hasn't changed over time when it always does.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, and I'm sure this is a question that's perhaps bouncing around people's heads, is it's not just product-led growth, around which there's a lot of conversation these days. It's also customer-led growth, as opposed to being one or the other.
Oh, and marketing-led growth, and community-led growth, and engineering-led growth. And there's a lot.
Okay. And would you say that perhaps purpose-driven brands are more easily inclined to take on a customer-led growth perspective as opposed to others?
And that's a good question. I'm not sure. I like to think so. So intentions are always good. We're always trying to make our customers happy. But I think that, and I just want to actually put out there that I'm a huge fan of product-led growth, massive, but it is very hard to build a viable, scalable, effective, highly converting product-led experience if you are not customer-led to begin with, right? If you don't deeply understand the problem you solve and who you're solving it for and how you solve it for them, and the value that solution provides to your customers, if you don't have that intimate understanding, you're going to have a very hard time building a scalable, programmatic experience that actually converts at a high rate. A sales-led approach or a high touch will always outperform programmatic and the product side of things. And that can be very confusing as well. But if you're in a situation where you want to leverage your product for acquisition more and more, I would say the first thing you do is learn about your customers, because otherwise you're going to be guessing. You're going to be relying on potentially old data or potentially conjecture or opinions from your sales team or your customer support or a success team. And there is a way to learn from your customers and operationalize it in a way that everybody can feel confident in and actually action. It's not actually as difficult as it may sound. It sounds really hard to do. And I'm not going to say that it's the easiest thing in the world to do, but it is absolutely doable. It is hard to read the label from inside the jar. And that is true for founders as it is for the folks on your team. And so providing them with a resource and a sort of source of truth for what good looks like and what high value customer experience looks like just enables your team to be successful and build really interesting and highly resonant sort of experiences for your customers, whether product-led or sales-led. Really, at the end of the day, what matters is that it is appropriate for your best customers, whichever one of these growth models you want to leverage.
Now, for someone who's perhaps keen on this idea of building out customer-led growth, where would you recommend they start this whole journey?
My answer to that question is definitely different if we're talking about a founder or a CEO versus somebody who is maybe in a head of marketing position or maybe in a customer success manager type of role or a product market, for example, because those are three very typical roles that would want to do this type of work or that recognize the need for this type of work. If I answer on the founder side of things or the CEO or at the exec level, definitely the place to start would be to pull together a cross-functional team of those folks, because those are the teams who are the most intimately familiar with your customer's experience, and they've got the most access to your customers. And they're the ones who live and breathe your customer's experience every day, whether on the marketing side, the customer success side, or the product side. So I would definitely say pulling together a cross-functional team, call it a task force, call it whatever you want. But that would be the sort of place to start, is to pull these resources together and basically provide them with the task of, hey, do we even know who our best customers are? Are we actually bringing the right person, the right type of customer to the front door? And then are we providing them the most appropriate experience in terms of showing them around and letting them evaluate our solution? Are we measuring their engagement in our product in a sort of meaningful way? It does take all of those folks, but I think first and foremost, it's really the recognition that there is an opportunity to improve. So if you've ever felt like, we haven't really figured out our scalable marketing strategy, we haven't really figured out how to, it feels like we're guessing. It feels like a lot of testing and a lot of experimentation. And it feels we're looking at what other companies are doing or what our competitors are doing, or it feels like we're relying on the tactics of other companies. Or if you are, this is another reason why a lot of companies reach out to us for this particular type of work, where they just know something is off. So slow or inconsistent growth. So something's shifted, and so something's changed, and likely what it is that your customer has changed. Right. So you have this sort of recognition of, actually, we might not be focused on the right customer anymore, or maybe we've lost sight of the problem space that we live in. And so oftentimes what founders will say to us is that we don't think we're putting our best foot forward. We know there's something off in our messaging and in our positioning, which is a symptom of the same problem. So that would be the recognition that actually we probably don't understand our customers quite as deeply as we need to in order to build out these scalable, high value experiences, and then pulling together a cross-functional team to address it.
Certainly. Once you have the team together, how do you start to learn from customers? A lot of people advocate some form of surveys or NPS scores, etc. And perhaps, to me, at least from my experiences, they almost seem to be done to death, if I could put it that way, that you're almost bombarded on it with those sorts of things on a daily basis. What would be the best ways to connect with your customers and really get to know them really well?
Yeah, it's very easy to say, right? Talk to your customers, but it's quite another to actually do it in a way that is actionable and that you can actually start to implement on the insights. So we rely on the jobs to be done approach to guide our research. And the reason for that is that, and I'm not a jobs to be done expert necessarily, and I won't get into the depths of what goes into that approach, though it's very much to go down that rabbit hole. But the reason why we really rely on the jobs to be done approach to guide our research is because it gives us insight into what was the moment that our customers decided that they needed to change, something needed to change. And what solution is somebody sort of firing in order to hire a new solution? And it gives us a lot of context around what their life is like. Additionally, we focus on things like, once they realize that they had this problem that, no, I cannot go on another day like this, I've got to solve this problem. What did they do? Where did they go? Who did they talk to? What influenced that decision? And also, once they discovered us, what was it about our solution that convinced them to give us a try? And then once they did give us a try, what convinced them to keep going? What motivated them to continue on? What are their sort of objections and deal breakers? And then once they got sort of value realization, what did that value realization look like for them? What was that better life? Or what are they able to do now that they weren't able to do before? And furthermore, how does that customer even evolve at that point? Once we help a customer solve their job to be done, what do they want to do next? So you can see what I just did was I basically went through in a very high level, this sort of like documentary of our customer as they evolve with us. I'm zooming right back out to that 30,000 foot view of the problem space they live in, the solution they're struggling with, all the way through to potentially expanded product usage or telling others about our product. And that is a very holistic approach to thinking about our customers' experience that yes, you can run NPS surveys. Yes, you can run exit interviews. You can do all of those things and they're absolutely valuable, but not until you understand this higher level, like what is it that our customers are actually struggling with and trying to solve by coming to us? What value do we provide them with? And so that high level sort of understanding of their struggle and their job to be done, way more valuable than persona work. I know a lot of companies rely on ICP type of data for this, and ICP data that it has its place. So an ideal customer profile is absolutely valuable for things like ad targeting and getting very specific with your campaigns. But what I'm describing, and as our exit interviews, as our NPS surveys, but what I'm describing is much more holistic and much more at the sort of like psychological level of what is a customer even trying to accomplish? What does that pain feel like? And how does that better life feel like? So if we can understand at that level, that's what we're going for with this type of research. So there's a number of research methods to use to uncover that, depending on how many customers you have, how long they've been around, and the different segments of customers you may have. The methodologies will change slightly. As a general rule, we would say if you can only do one type of customer research, do interviews. If you're in this scenario, though, where you've got hundreds of thousands of customers or even tens of thousands of customers, I highly recommend starting with a survey in order to pre-qualify for interviews, because you would risk otherwise, if you didn't do that, you would risk otherwise getting like an unfair sort of sampling of your customers. And there's a lot more. I could talk about just this topic all day long, but there's specific criteria to use in order to segment out the customers you should even be learning from. That's very important, right? Not all customers are created equally. And then once you learn from your customers, there's all kinds of ways to segment and think about what you learn. Because again, even after you've done your research and you've parsed your interview transcripts, say, you may identify a couple of different customer segments within that group, and you can have a decision to make potentially at that point where you might say, you know what, we serve this segment of our customers really well. They onboard into our product seamlessly. They aren't a drain on our customer support team. They're a lower cost to acquire. They're super, super happy and they stick around for a long time. They're high LTV. And then these other groups, they're good, but they're not quite as good as this other segment. And so that gives you another opportunity to then lean in on that subset segment of customers and start solving for that group. So I skimmed over the top of the research to try to get to the end where you get to the sort of cream of the crop, the customers you want to clone, the customers you want more of.
With this process, would you also be interviewing past customers, those who perhaps churned? No. Okay.
No, and I'm not saying not ever. So it's not no forever, but I would, and this question comes up all the time. It's uncanny how often people ask that question. I can totally understand why there is this sense of we probably could have done a better job with them. If they'd just known that we did XYZ thing, we could have saved that customer. And while that might be true, you've got a bunch of happy customers already sitting there to learn from. And so why would you go to a potentially worse fit or riskier group of customers that you couldn't already retain? So again, if you've got even 100 happily paying customers, you can carve out a group of maybe 25 of them and reach out to them and ask them to get on a 20-minute, 30-minute call and run through a series of these questions like I was describing, what you would try to learn from them. and identify the patterns, even in just those 12 customers, and you will learn very actionable insights that you can implement probably more easily than you would be able to if you were doing the same thing with exit interviews. So like this customer experience that we all want to create for our customers, the answers for how to do that live inside the heads of our best customers already. So why would we not pull that out and try to operationalize that? It's available to us.
And when you were talking about scenarios where you've got perhaps hundreds, if not thousands of customers, you suggested doing a survey. And with that survey, is that just to filter out those who are perhaps getting the most value from the product?
Yeah. So in general, we recommend focusing on with 3 criteria. So basically, they've got to be happy with your product as it is today. They've got to be paying, because willingness to pay obviously is wildly important. And then the third criteria that often gets missed is they need to be recent. So they shouldn't have made a decision about your product so long ago that they forget what life was like before. So we want that recency, because we want the emotion, we want how viscerally it sucked to deal with the problem that your product helps them, right? So we want those folks that remember, because if you go back to customers who've been around for 2 or 3 years, first of all, the world was a very different place. But second of all, they're going to start filling gaps in their memory with what they think you want to hear. And they may fill it with not as valuable information. So we do say to go recent. Generally, we say in the 9 to 6 month range, but that obviously varies wildly with, if you're in an enterprise space and you've got a longer sales cycle, 6 months is nothing. But if you're in a more self-serve scenario, then I would definitely go to that more into the 6 month range to those customers. So that's how I would segment down. It's really important to do it with companies rather that have hundreds of thousands or even tens of thousands of customers. You'll definitely want to run a survey first anyway to qualify for interviews. But I will say I've had a lot of success with surveys alone. So I think it's probably worthwhile explaining what I mean by surveys, because when people think of surveys, they think of multiple choice, and they think of like just a checkboxes, 15 questions with multiple choice. And that's not what I'm describing at all. What I'm actually describing is a 5 to 7 question survey they're all open text field. Maybe a segmenting question at the beginning of it to understand, like if you don't have this data inside your customer base already, where you maybe know what type of company they are, or some company type or company size isn't always the most important segmentation, but sometimes we would add a segmenting question to the front end of the survey just to help us parse the responses. But there's very specific questions that you can ask in a survey, open text, where you can expect, depending on how happy your customer base is, anywhere between a 5 to 15% response rate. And you're looking for, because they're open text, and they're all going to be like, this isn't multiple choice. You're not going to get a chart out of this until you actually read all of these responses. So generally, you're looking for about 25 to 50 survey responses, because that's going to give you meaningful patterns that you're going to start to recognize in those survey responses. And then once you recognize those patterns, you can segment those survey responses in the ways that I was describing. And I've actually had a lot of success with companies running surveys alone, because they're like borderline qualitative type style of survey. We can identify a lot of great information depending on your customers, depending on how fully developed their answers are. You might serve the developer market, and classic developers will give you like 3-word answers on your surveys, not going to be as helpful, as opposed to if you serve marketers, you might get a little bit more. So you might be able to actually run with surveys alone, or at least just start with surveys and start implementing some of the learnings in the short term. And a survey can take 2 weeks. That's a really quick turnaround, as opposed to interviews, which obviously are a little bit more time intensive.
So once we've begun to understand the journey from the customer's point of view, how do we map this whole journey out in a practical or actionable way?
So the patterns that I was mentioning before in the research, either whether surveys or in interviews, can be organized in a way that basically gives us that documentary. So it's giving us two things, that type of research. It's giving us three things. One of the things that it's doing, it's helping us identify what are the different jobs to be done in our customer base for that high level sort of strategic decision. Which of these customers do we actually want to lean into? So that's one thing that comes out of the research. Another thing that comes out of the research is messaging. So what language do they use? How do they describe their problem? How do they describe us? How do they describe our features? How do they describe the value that they now get? So you can also pull out a very meaningful messaging strategy. And then the other thing that we pull out from it, which is the answer to your question, is we start to see this documentary of here's what they were struggling with before. Here's where they decided they had to change things. Here's where they went to try to solve this problem. Here's how they discovered us. Here's what their experience was like on our website. Here's what their experience was like when they got into our product, and so on and so forth. And so we end up identifying that holistic experience, customer experience, just by virtue of the questions that we asked during the research. And so we can understand, sorry, just to cap that, we can understand the milestones or those sort of leaps of faith, or said another way, their moments of value in their relationship with us. And in general, there are three phases. There's like this struggle phase where our customer has the problem that we solve. And then there's an evaluation phase where they decide to give our product a try and actually solve that problem. And then in SaaS, because recurring revenue, there is a growth phase where we need them to be getting continued value with our product over time and even expanded value over time. So those three phases, struggle, evaluation, and growth, are then further broken down into these moments of value that I was describing, like those leaps of faith. And that's how we really start to operationalize it and think about what are our customers doing, thinking, and feeling inside of each of these milestones. And then when we understand that, we can identify what our KPIs should be for each of those milestones. And that's where things really start to get interesting.
When you say operationalize the process, is it just based off KPIs and then implementing processes that facilitate those KPIs? Or is there more to the...
Oh, there's definitely more. So I would say a big milestone in the customer-led growth process, for lack of a better expression, using milestone a lot, is very much understanding those leaps of faith and getting into alignment as a cross-functional team on what those milestones are. Because the research is one thing, our product strategy is another, our team's understanding of our company and our product and the customer experience is another, the type of business we want to build is another. It's customer research and customer insight is wildly valuable, but it is one input. Yep. And so we all need to agree that, yes, this is our customer's job to be done that we want to focus on. That's a strategic decision that I mentioned before. But then once we've made that decision, we can look at the customer experience and say, okay, here are our customers that get a ton of value, that inherently understand the value that we provide, have a high willingness to pay, stick around for a long time, and have the high lifetime relationship with us. Their likeliness of sticking around for a long time is very high. Then we want to figure out as a team, and leaning on the research, but also relying on our current customer experience, here are the major sort of milestones. There are some general rules of thumb. We don't reinvent the wheel where we need to. I'm not talking about a 13-stage customer experience map here. In general, we're talking 5, 6, 7, maximum 8 milestones, depending on the complexity of your customers and the complexity of your product. Obviously, that will change a little bit. For instance, if you've got a pilot that you offer, or a proof of concept, if you have a sales-led approach versus a product-led, that the milestones will adapt slightly. But everybody being in alignment on what those milestones are is a major, again, lack of better expression, milestone in this process that everybody agrees. This is what we want our customers to experience in their relationship with us. And then once that decision has been made, then we can look at the specific parts of, the sort of touch points in our customer experience that are measurable, that demonstrate to us we've done our job helping our customers get from one milestone to the next. And that's the KPIs are really meant to tell us and be a signal to us that we've done our job helping them get to that moment of value. And then following that, there is other work to be done, which I'm happy to talk about if you want to get to that part.
Sure. I'm curious though, in getting to this point, obviously communication internally within the company is important, as is, if I'm hearing you correctly, creating a bit of a culture as well and embedding that culture. What are the better ways to go about doing that?
To creating that culture?
Yeah. And that open and free communication across all teams.
Yeah, I'm sure you've witnessed this yourself, but it is very hard to argue with customer feedback and what our customers say about us. Again, reading the label from inside the jar is challenging. And when we get the opportunity to learn from our customers, that's very compelling. One of the things that we absolutely recommend and that we do as part of our process of working with companies is highlighting those customer quotes that are representative of these big learnings and insights that came out of the research. Because if we can democratize that across the organization, it's a lot easier to not only get on board with this process of identifying these milestones, but also help us see our role in the customer's experience and feel closer not only to the project, but our customers, and creating those sort of experiences. So again, I'm sure this is something you've experienced as well. It's really powerful when you can share customer insight like that with the team. And if you have a smaller cross-functional team that's responsible with democratizing these insights across the organization, you'll have a lot higher likelihood of buy-in across the company for sure.
Brilliant. And sorry, you were saying there's more to the entire process.
Yeah. So where rubber hits the road in terms of implementation and like moving the needle on revenue is actually when we have those KPIs identified and that those milestones identified, we can then say, okay, we have this picture of what good looks like for our best customers. We all agree these are our best customers. We all agree this is the experience we want to provide to them. We all agree these are going to be our measures of success to help these best customers get to these moments of value. Now comes time to actually do the hard part, which is admit that you might be dropping the ball in a couple of places and basically do a review of your current customer experience through the lens of this best customer. So again, we rely on this like customer job sort of statement as a very meaningful yet also digestible way to think about the value we provide to our customers. So if we've got a really well-crafted customer job statement, then we would put that top of mind. We understand the experience now. We've gone through intimately what our customers experience at every milestone in our relationship with them. Now we need to put that hat on and forget who we are, right? Do the secret shopper thing and go through our customer experience with that hat on, with those shoes on, with the glasses on, whatever you want to say. And really realistically look at where are we dropping the ball? Where is our messaging off? Oftentimes it's messaging that's off. First thing is actually our website doesn't actually address the needs of these amazing customers of ours. We need to rethink the messaging on our website. And then we get into the product and we go, what? Our customers said they got a lot of value from these particular parts of our product. We've buried that. That's too far into the customer onboarding. We should move those up and change the hierarchy of how we introduce our product and when and how, and the ways that we describe them. And then we start to also recognize sometimes that we've been using measures of success for product engagement that's like weekly active accounts or weekly active users or monthly active users, when that might be completely void of any meaning and have actually nothing to do with our customers reaching value realization within our product. And so we then recognize, oh, there's opportunity to show some of the other toys in the toy box and surface some of the more sophisticated ways to use our product beyond just delivering them first value, but to actually get to value realization and then using our product in more sophisticated ways after that. So we tend to, as we're doing this sweep or review of our customer experience, we tend to identify all kinds of opportunities to improve the customer experience and surface the parts of our product in more meaningful ways that actually matches up with what our customers say are valuable. And then the challenge becomes, okay, we've got like 50 things we could do. How do we prioritize this list?
Yep.
Which is everybody's problem. Even
Yep.
if you talk to any marketer, the challenge of any marketer is not, I don't have any ideas. It's, I've got so many ideas, I don't know how to prioritize them. So prioritization is very, very important at that stage, obviously. And as a cross-functional project, thankfully, you've got product folks thinking about how the product can help solve these problems. You've got customer success and support thinking about how they can add potentially customer education or guides for onboarding into your product. You've got marketing thinking about how to bring not only better fit customers to the front door, but also how to have your website convert more of those high value customers. And if marketing is responsible for product activation, then thinking about those flows as well. But as a general rule of thumb, do not fill a leaky bucket, right? If you find out that your product onboarding is majorly missing the mark, or if you went into this project recognizing and already knowing that your product onboarding is missing the mark, do not spend another cent on ads. Right? All your resources should be spent on fixing that problem because that is literal money on the table. There is no point in filling that leaky bucket. And I want to say 9.5 times out of 10, when we work with a company and we go through this process, the first two things that get addressed are messaging, positioning and messaging on the website, and the product onboarding, because almost always we're like, nope, those two things are off. And there's no point in spending money on marketing if we're not bringing in the right people. And I've got all kinds of examples of companies that we've worked with where we address those things. And it is very empowering. And those things getting fixed means all the rest then becomes available to us. Marketing opportunities become available to us. Product engagement becomes available to us. Win back and re-engagement types of programs become available to us. Expansion programs become available to us, which is where recurring revenue business is really. So yeah, that's the process really, is sometimes admitting that the baby is ugly and that we got to fix our problems before telling marketing more leads, which is the classic.
Very interesting, very powerful. Georgiana, with this whole idea of customer-led growth, do you find that there are perhaps a couple of aspects that don't get much airtime, don't get talked about very much? If so, what would they be?
Oh, wow. Focusing on the wrong customer. That's probably the biggest thing that we see, and that is the most detrimental, is you've been bringing in the wrong customer this whole time, or you've been spending for the privilege to bring in a bad fit customer. That happens a lot. A lot of the time, the companies that reach out to us, they are in this, we need more leads mindset. And it does not take long to figure out that actually their issue is positioning and messaging on their website and their product onboarding experience. So that, I would say, first and foremost. Another missed opportunity that does not get nearly enough airplay is expansion. So after you've helped your customer solve their job to be done and solve their problem, what next? Is our product actually leveraging all the opportunities after we've solved that first job for them, so to speak? And this is the privilege of more mature companies, that when you get to that stage, it becomes very exciting because you're starting to have conversations not about churn, but about net revenue retention. And the conversation completely shifts and you start thinking about customer marketing and expansion programs. And things start to get really interesting there. It doesn't get enough airplay, but I understand why, because if the fundamentals are off, you can't get there. So those would be the two biggest, definitely, that I would say.
And to wrap things up, Georgiana, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
That it's probably time to stop guessing. You do not need to be guessing. The answers to the questions you are likely asking about how to grow your company are inside the heads of your best customers, and you just need to pull them out. That's the sort of genesis of this.
Brilliant. Now, you've written a book, I believe it's called Forget the Funnel. Is that available at major retailers or online?
So the book is actually launching on May 9. So depending on, yes, the timing is very close. So depending on when this goes to air, so to speak, the book will be available on Amazon. But if you go to forgetthefunnel.com, it's very easy. There's a book page there where all the links will be available to get it. And it basically is it's not a theoretical book. It's a very practical the step-by-step process that I've been describing. It goes deep into detail on how to do all of this.
Right. We'll include a link to that in the show notes. So if listeners are curious and want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend that they head to?
So I'm less active on Twitter than I used to be, but I am still on Twitter. I'm holding on for dear life over there. My Twitter handle is terrible because I chose it way before Twitter was being taken seriously. So it's GAA, but I'm also available on LinkedIn. But I would definitely say the website, so forgetthefunnel.com, would be the best place to go to learn about Claire and I and what we're doing and how we support not only teams with our sort of services, but also our training. We have a community for teams to join where they can get access to us and like with office hours and access to other really smart folks that have been through this process as well. So it's not all about services necessarily with us. We do teach a lot of this stuff as well. If you are interested in having your team schooled on this process, we can absolutely help on that side.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for doing this. It's been absolutely brilliant, Georgiana.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.